In the heart of a golden empire, where power ruled stronger than love, one secret affair dared to defy a dynasty. A prince sworn to the throne, and a woman from the shadows who captured his heart. Their forbidden love ignited whispers, rebellion, and bloodshed, a passion so powerful it almost destroyed an empire. This is the story they tried to erase from history, but love never truly dies. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, because what you're about to hear will change how you see royal love forever. In the heart of the Mughal Empire, during the reign of Emperor Akbar, the world glittered with gold, silk, and poetry. The empire stretched farther than any other in the east, and its capital, Fatehpur Sikri, was a city of marvels, grand palaces carved from red sandstone, courtyards echoing with music, and halls filled with the scent of roses and burning incense. Yet, behind this dazzling splendor lay a secret that could shatter the very foundations of the throne. It was a story of love, forbidden, dangerous, and powerful enough to challenge the might of an emperor. Prince Salim, the only surviving son of Emperor Akbar, was destined to rule one day. He had everything a prince could desire, armies at his command, riches beyond imagination, and the blood of conquerors in his veins. But what he did not have was peace. He was restless, defiant, and unafraid to question his father's power. Akbar, the wise and visionary ruler, believed in reason, in empire, and in destiny. Salim, on the other hand, believed in passion, and that passion would lead him straight into ruin. The story begins on a warm evening in 1580. When the palace prepared for one of Akbar's grand celebrations, the halls of Fatehpur Sikri glowed under thousands of oil lamps. Musicians tuned their sitars, dancers shimmered in silk and gold, and nobles whispered of politics and power. But the prince's eyes weren't on the throne or the courtiers. His gaze fell upon a single dancer, one whose beauty seemed to freeze time itself. Her name was Nadira Begum, but the world would remember her by another name, Anarkali, the pomegranate blossom. When she danced, even the most hardened generals found themselves spellbound. Her movements were poetry, her eyes like liquid fire, and when she turned, her anklets rang softly, a sound that would echo forever in the prince's heart. Salim had seen many women before, but something about her felt different. She didn't bow too deeply when she greeted him, nor did she look afraid. There was something bold in her eyes, something that said she was not merely another performer in the emperor's court. From that moment, Salim was lost. Every evening, he found himself searching for her among the performers. He sent secret messages, disguised as gifts, a silk scarf here, a ruby bangle there. At first, she ignored them. She knew what danger such attention brought. To catch the eye of a prince was both an honor and a curse. But fate has a strange way of drawing two souls together. One night, as a monsoon storm rolled over the city, Salim walked alone through the palace gardens. The rain fell hard, and the scent of wet jasmine filled the air. In the flicker of lightning, he saw her standing beneath the marble pavilion, drenched, her eyes filled with both fear and defiance. She didn't bow when she saw him. She simply said, "You shouldn't be here, my lord." And yet, Salim replied, stepping closer, "I am." That night began a secret that would live in whispers and shadows. They met when the moon was high, and the palace asleep. Between the walls of marble and mirrors, love grew fierce, forbidden, and unstoppable. Anarkali wasn't just beautiful. She was intelligent, witty, and unafraid to speak her mind. She spoke to Salim not as a prince, but as a man. And that was something he'd never known before. But even in their stolen moments, fear always lingered. Because love, in a palace built on power, is never private for long. Rumors began to spread quietly at first, among servants and musicians, then among the courtiers, who saw how the prince's eyes followed her every movement. And soon, they reached the emperor's ears. Akbar, who ruled over millions with wisdom and strength, could not tolerate scandal, especially one that threatened the image of his royal court. At first, he ignored it, believing it was merely youthful foolishness. But when he saw how distracted his son had become, neglecting his duties, skipping councils, and spending nights in secret, his patience began to fade. Akbar summoned Anarkali to his private chambers. She walked in, her head bowed but her step steady. The emperor's eyes were sharp and cold. "They say," Akbar began slowly, "that you've enchanted my son." "My lord," she said softly, "the prince's heart is his own. I have no power to command it." Her words, though respectful, carried a quiet courage that startled him. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he ordered her to be sent away from court, to Lahore, far from Salim's reach. But love, when tested, becomes even stronger. Upon learning of her exile, was furious. For the first time, he openly defied his father. He rode out with a handful of loyal guards, determined to bring her back. The act was reckless, treasonous even, and it shook the empire. When Akbar learned what his son had done, he saw it not as love, but as rebellion. The future emperor of Hindustan was disobeying his own father for the sake of a dancer. To Akbar, it was not just unacceptable, it was dangerous. For if the prince could defy the emperor, what message did that send to the empire? Salim's return to the palace was not triumphant. He was confronted by his father in the Grand Duanakas, the hall of private audience. The torches flickered as father and son faced each other, one the greatest ruler of his time, the other a prince blinded by love. Do you know what you risk? Akbar's voice thundered. You dare to put a woman before your duty. I put my heart before fear, Selim shot back. You may command an empire, father, but you cannot command love. The court fell silent. Akbar's face turned to stone. In that moment, something broke, not just between father and son, but within the empire itself. What had once been a whisper of scandal became the spark of open conflict. Akbar ordered that Anarkali be imprisoned, her fate undecided. Salim, stripped of his command, was confined to his quarters under heavy guard. Days turned into weeks, and yet the prince refused to surrender. He sent letters, secret pleas, even bribes to the guards. And Anarkali, trapped in her small cell lit only by a single oil lamp, held on to hope. Then, one night, a whisper reached her cell. The prince's voice. I will not let them bury our love in silence, he said through the wall. I swear, on the throne I was born to inherit, I will find you. Outside, the empire stood at the edge of chaos. Nobles began to take sides, some loyal to the emperor, others quietly sympathizing with the prince. For the first time, the great Mughal dynasty trembled, not from enemies at its gates, but from love within its walls. And yet, the most tragic part of their story had not even begun. For in the days to come, choices would be made, choices that would test the strength of a father's rule, the depth of a son's love, and the cost of a woman's heart. The story of Anarkali and Prince Salim was no longer just a secret affair. It had become a shadow over the empire, one that would decide the fate of both throng and love. As the sun set over the domes of Fatehpur, the sound of a lone flute drifted through the air, a melody soft and sorrowful. Somewhere behind those palace walls, two hearts beat for each other, knowing that every beat might be their last. And thus, the curtain fell on the first act of a love that defied kings, crossed the boundaries of power, and set history ablaze. The palace of Fatehpur had grown silent in the weeks that followed. Where once laughter and music filled its marble corridors, now there was only tension, thick, heavy, and unspoken. The emperor and the prince no longer dined together, no longer exchanged words except through messengers. The love between father and son had turned to something colder, like the steel of the swords that now guarded their doors. But love has a way of surviving even behind bars. Each night, Selim would sneak past his guards, using secret tunnels known only to the royal bloodline. He knew where Anarkali was kept, deep beneath the palace, in a dimly lit chamber meant for traitors and spies. The guards who once served Akbar's command now quietly turned away as the prince descended the steps. They had seen the madness in his eyes, not of anger, but of devotion. When the heavy door opened, Anarkali would rise from her cot, her eyes lighting up despite the bruises of despair. For a few stolen minutes, they would talk, not of escape, but of dreams. She would tell him of her childhood, of how she learned to dance not for kings, but for the stars. And he would tell her of his loneliness, of how every royal title felt like a cage. Do you regret it? He asked one night, voice breaking. Regret, she whispered. How can I regret something that made me feel alive? Her words pierced his heart. He took her hands, promising again what he could not keep, that he would free her, that he would fight the world if he had to. But above them, the world was already moving. Akbar's advisors warned him that his son's obsession was dangerous. They spoke of whispers in the barracks that the prince's men still swore loyalty to him, that they were ready to rise if he called. The empire had survived invasions, rebellions, and betrayal, but never before had the threat come from within. Akbar's heart was heavy. He was not a cruel man. History would remember him as a just ruler, one who sought peace and reason. But he was also an emperor, bound by duty to protect his throne. And so, one stormy evening, he made a choice that would haunt him forever. Anarkali was to be moved far away, beyond the reach of the prince. When Selim discovered this, his rage erupted like a wildfire. He confronted his father, not as a son, but as a man desperate to save the only thing that gave his life meaning. Why must you destroy what you do not understand? He shouted, his voice echoing through the royal court. Akbar's calm finally broke. Because you are a prince. Because your heart is not your own. It belongs to the people, to the empire. You speak of love, Selim, but what you feel is weakness. And weakness cannot sit upon the throne of Hindustan. I would rather die for love than live for power, Selim replied, trembling with fury. The emperor's gaze hardened. Then you leave me no choice. Within hours, Akbar ordered his arrest. The prince who would one day inherit an empire was now declared a traitor. But Salim was not a man to surrender quietly. He had friends in the army, loyal commanders who believed he was the rightful future. In secret, he gathered forces in the nearby province of Allah. Word spread like wildfire. The prince was raising a rebellion against his own father. The empire divided overnight. In the north, banners bearing Akbar's sun emblem marched with imperial pride. In the south, Salim's army rose with a cry of defiance. What began as a forbidden love had now turned into civil war. The first battle took place near the banks of the Yamuna River, the air filled with smoke, the ground with blood. Selim, clad in silver armor, rode at the front lines, his eyes burning with vengeance. His heart, still chained to a woman, locked away in darkness. But the emperor's army was vast, disciplined, and ruthless. After weeks of brutal fighting, Salim's forces began to falter. For every soldier who fought for him, 10 fought for Akbar. Eventually, the prince's rebellion crumbled under the weight of his father's might, captured and brought back in chains. Selim stood once again before the throne he was born to inherit. Now, as a prisoner, the great emperor Akbar looked upon his son with pain deeper than anger. "I should have you executed," Akbar said quietly. "The law demands it." "Then do it," Salim answered, his voice hollow. "For there is nothing left for me to live for." For a long time, the emperor said nothing. Then, with a trembling sigh, he dismissed the guards. "Do you not see what you've done?" he said, his voice breaking. "You've turned love into rebellion. You've set fire to everything I built." Selim lifted his eyes. "You built an empire, father, but she gave me a soul." There was silence between them, the kind that exists when two worlds collide. Finally, Akbar spoke again, his words slow and heavy. "If I spare your life, the empire may forgive me, but if I spare hers, it never will." Those words struck Salim like a blade. He knew what they meant. He fell to his knees, pleading for her life. "Take my crown, take my birthright, take everything but let her live." But the emperor's mind was made up. He rose from the throne, turned away, and said softly, "The empire comes before the heart." That night, a silent order was given. Anarkali was to die. They took her from her cell under the cover of darkness, away from the eyes of the court. She asked for no mercy, only one request, that her death be swift, and that the prince never be told until it was done. But fate, cruel as it was, had other plans. Salim learned of it before dawn. He broke free from his guards, racing through the palace like a madman. When he reached the courtyard, he saw her bound, surrounded by soldiers. Her face calm despite everything. She smiled when she saw him, not in fear, but in love. He screamed her name, but before he could reach her, the soldiers pulled him back. "Let me die with her," he shouted. "If love is a crime, let us both be punished." But Akbar, watching from the shadows, could not bear to look. His command was absolute. Anarkali was sealed alive within a stone wall, her cries echoing through the courtyard. As bricks were laid one by one, some said she prayed as the wall rose. Others said she whispered his name until her voice faded. When the last brick was set, the silence that followed was unbearable. Selim collapsed to the ground, his screams breaking the still night. The emperor turned away, his heart crushed beneath the weight of his own decree. The next morning, the sun rose over Fatehfur Sikri, but it was no longer the same. The palace seemed colder, emptier. No music played, no laughter was heard, and in the prince's chamber, a single crimson scarf lay across his bed, the one he had once given her. From that day, Salim changed. The rebellion was over, but so was the light in his eyes. He would one day sit on the throne as Emperor Jahangir, ruling a vast and powerful land, but he would never again speak her name aloud. Yet every year, on a certain night, he would disappear from his court. The guards knew where he went, to a quiet corner of Lahore, where the ruins of an old wall still stood. There, he would place a single red rose, kneel, and whisper, for the love that defied an empire. Years passed, but for Prince Selim, time had ceased to move. The empire continued to thrive under Emperor Akbar's rule. The cities grew richer, the armies stronger, yet the prince lived as a shadow of himself. The laughter that once echoed through the marble halls had vanished from his lips. Every corridor of Fatehfur Sikri whispered her name. Every mirror reflected the image of the woman he had lost. He no longer rode his favorite stallion, no longer visited the gardens where she once danced beneath the moonlight. Instead, he spent his nights alone, staring into the dark sky, as if searching for her soul among the stars. Servants spoke in hushed tones of how the prince often murmured in his sleep. The same word, again and again. Anarkali, Akbar, watched from afar. The emperor who had conquered lands and hearts could not conquer the sorrow he had planted in his own son. There were nights when Akbar would walk to the balcony overlooking the silent courtyard, his heart aching at the memory of the wall, the one that sealed not just a girl, but the happiness of his bloodline. He never admitted it aloud, but the burden of that decision would haunt him until his final breath. As years turned into decades, fate began to shift again. Akbar's health started to fail, and the empire looked toward Selim, now a man hardened by loss, yet still a prince destined to rule. Many feared that grief had made him weak, that the ghost of his forbidden love would cloud his judgment. But those who met his gaze saw something else, a fire that had been tempered by pain. When Akbar finally passed away, the kingdom mourned deeply. Selim ascended the throne as Emperor the world Caesar. Yet behind the grand coronation, behind the golden crown and roaring cheers, the new emperor carried a heart that still bled quietly for a dancer buried in stone. He ruled with justice, with wisdom, and with compassion, but always from a distance, as though afraid to feel too much. His courtiers often noticed how he avoided celebrations of love and weddings. When poets recited verses of passion, Jahangir would close his eyes. listening not to their words but to the echoes of her laughter in his mind. Some say that one evening, as he walked alone in the gardens of Lahore, he felt a sudden breeze carrying the faint scent of jasmine, the same perfume Anarkali once wore. He turned sharply, and for a fleeting moment swore he saw her silhouette under the moonlight. She did not speak, only smiled, that same soft smile she had given him before her end, and then vanished into the mist. From that night onward, Jahangir began visiting the ruins of the old palace more often. He ordered no one to follow, no guards, no attendants. He would disappear for hours, sometimes all night, returning at dawn with eyes red from weeping. Whispers spread through the empire that the ghost of Anarkali walked beside the emperor, that her spirit still lingered near him, unable to rest because her love had never been fulfilled. Historians wrote of Jahangir's accomplishments, his architecture, his diplomacy, his reforms. But the poets, the artists, and the lovers remembered something else. The man who once risked everything for love. There's an old legend, told by the people of Lahore, that one night Jahangir stood before the very wall where Anarkali had been entombed. He placed his hand upon the cold stone and whispered, "Forgive me for not saving you." And as he turned to leave, he heard a faint voice, soft as a sigh, saying, "You did." Terrified yet overwhelmed, the emperor ordered the site sealed forever. He built a marble pavilion nearby, filled with roses, where he would come to pray alone. Centuries later, when explorers discovered an ancient tomb in Lahore, bearing the name Anar, they found it adorned with verses that read, "If I could see my beloved once more, I would give thanks even in death." No one could prove if Jahangir himself had built that tomb, but its presence was undeniable, a silent monument to the love that refused to die. As the years passed, Jahangir's rule grew more complicated. Politics, power, and betrayal returned to his court, but his heart remained trapped in the same story. Even when he married other women, even when he crowned Nur Jahan as his empress, the world could see it. She ruled beside a man who lived in memory of another. Nur Jahan, intelligent and ambitious, understood this truth. Once, she asked him gently, "Your Majesty, why do you look to the stars every night? What do you seek there?" Jahangir smiled faintly. "A promise I once made that I would find her again, even beyond the heavens." The empress said nothing more, for she knew that no woman, no crown, no empire could erase the shadow of the dancer who had stolen the prince's soul. As the emperor grew older, his grip on the world loosened. Illness struck, and nights became longer. In his final years, Jahangir often spoke to no one, lost in memories of youth. The courtiers feared his silence, unaware that he was conversing with ghosts. One night, as he lay weak in his chambers, he asked his servants to leave him alone. The candles flickered low, and a soft fragrance filled the air, the scent of jasmine again. The emperor opened his eyes, and, in that dim light, saw her. She stood by his bedside, just as beautiful as she had been the night they first met. Her veil shimmered like moonlight, and her eyes were full of peace. "Have you come for me?" he whispered. She nodded, her smile tender. "It is time." He reached out, his trembling hand brushing against hers, warm, real, alive. In that moment, the weight of the empire fell away, and he was no longer a king, no longer a prisoner of power or regret. He was simply a man, reunited with his love. When the servants entered at dawn, they found the emperor lying still, his face serene, a faint smile upon his lips, as if he had finally found the one thing he had searched for all his life. After Jahangir's death, stories spread like wildfire. Some claimed that on quiet nights, when the moonlight touched the marble of Lahore Fort, two shadows could be seen walking hand in hand, one dressed as a prince, the other as a dancer. Others said that the scent of jasmine would suddenly fill the air near her tomb, even when no flowers bloomed. Whether myth or truth, one thing was certain: the empire remembered them. Poets wrote songs, artists painted their love, and storytellers kept their memory alive across centuries. Their tale was no longer just about rebellion or tragedy. It became a symbol of what love can endure when even power cannot. And somewhere, perhaps in the afterlife, the prince and the dancer finally danced together beneath an endless sky. No walls, no thrones, no fear, only freedom. Centuries passed, yet the love of Prince Salim and Anarkali refused to fade away. Time buried kingdoms, toppled empires, and erased dynasties, but somehow, their story endured. It survived in whispers, in songs, in the cracks of the marble palaces where their laughter once echoed. Even as new rulers rose to power, people still spoke of the dancer who defied an emperor, and the prince who would have burned an empire to save her. In Lahore, travelers still pause near an ancient tomb, shrouded in mystery. Locals call it the Tomb of Anar. Surrounded by crumbling red walls and fading gardens, it stands quietly against the passing centuries. Some believe it was built by Emperor Jahangir himself, hidden away as an eternal apology to the woman he could never forget. Others claim it was erected much later, a poet's tribute to a love so tragic that history itself couldn't silence it. No official record mentions her existence. No royal historian dared to write her name. Yet, the people never stopped telling her story. For them, Anarkali was not just a dancer. She was the embodiment of forbidden love, of courage, of sacrifice. In the modern city that grew around it, the tomb remains a paradox. Historians debate endlessly, was she real, or just a myth woven by poets? Some argue that she was merely a fictional creation, a metaphor for rebellion against tyranny. Others insist she lived, danced, loved, and died within those palace walls. But the evidence, though faint, speaks otherwise. Hidden in the Mughal archives, there exists a faded letter said to be written by Prince Selim himself during his exile. It reads, "I have lost my throne to my father, my love to his pride, and my soul to her grave. If paradise exists, it will not be golden halls, it will be the place where she smiles again." No one knows whether these words truly belonged to Jahan, but their sorrow felt too human to be imagined. That as the Mughal Empire expanded, Lahore became one of its most dazzling jewels, a city of beauty, art, and splendor. Yet amid the grandeur, there was always that one corner, quiet, shadowed, sacred, where the story of a prince and a dancer lay carved into stone. When British archaeologists arrived in the 19th century, they were astonished by the tomb's structure. Unlike the typical Islamic architecture of its time, it had a blend of Persian grace and Mughal artistry, suggesting it was built by someone of royal blood, perhaps even the emperor himself. On its walls, faint inscriptions remained visible, including one Persian couplet that reads, "If I could see the face of my beloved once more, I would thank God, even in death." The words burned through the pages of history like a confession to long buried. It is said that when Jahangir died, he was buried in a magnificent tomb not far from Lahore. Some believe he asked for his resting place to be close to hers, so that, even in death, he could remain near the woman he had lost. Whether true or not, the two tombs stand not too far apart, one for a king remembered by history, the other for a woman remembered by love. Generations of poets and filmmakers have resurrected their story again and again. In every retelling, Anarkali lives a little longer. She dances once more under moonlight, her anklets echoing through centuries. And in every telling, the prince still watches her with eyes full of love and fear, as if each performance is both a celebration and a farewell. There is a strange power in stories like theirs. Tales where love is so strong it defies time, politics, and even death. Theirs was never meant to survive. It was crushed beneath the weight of duty, honor, and empire. Yet, somehow, it became immortal. The empire that once silenced them no longer exists. The grand palaces have turned to ruins. The thrones are empty, the jewels scattered, the names of emperors fading into dust. But when people speak of love, true, reckless, all-consuming love, the name Anarkali still lives. In museums and libraries across the world, historians continue their search for truth. Some have found evidence suggesting that Anarkali might have been one of Akbar's courtesans, a woman of Persian descent who rose through grace and intelligence. Others claim she was a maid who caught the young prince's eye by accident. Whatever the truth, one fact remains undeniable. She became an icon, representing the defiance of the human heart against the chains of power. One modern historian wrote, "Even if Anarkali never existed, she should have, because history needs her, not for what she did, but for what she represents." Indeed, her story reflects something deeper, the battle between love and duty, between heart and crown. Every ruler must make choices, and every choice leaves a ghost behind. Akbar, for all his greatness, could never erase the guilt of having sacrificed love for control. His empire thrived, but his family fractured. Jahangir became a ruler shaped by loss, his heart scarred by the weight of his father's decision. In the quiet corners of Jahangir's palace, servants once reported strange happenings. They claimed that sometimes, at night, faint music could be heard. The soft rhythm of gungrus, the gentle hum of a woman's song, echoing through empty corridors. The emperor, it was said, would smile in his sleep, as though comforted by her presence. Even after centuries, visitors who come to Anarkali's tomb describe feeling an inexplicable stillness. Some say the air grows heavy, as if carrying secrets too painful to speak. Others claim to smell jasmine, faint but undeniable, drifting through the air, though no flowers bloom nearby. It is as if her spirit still lingers there, waiting for someone who promised to return. Over time, the legend grew beyond borders. Poets in Persia wrote verses about her tragedy. In Turkey, her name became synonymous with unfulfilled love. Even European travelers during the Mughal era mentioned tales of a dancer entombed alive for loving a prince, whether they exaggerated or translated from rumor. The story found its way into every language, every heart. Centuries later, when filmmakers and writers rediscovered the tale, they gave her a voice once more. In films, she dances again. In novels, she speaks the words she was never allowed to say. In songs, her love is reborn with every verse. Some stories die when their heroes do, but this one has only grown stronger, and maybe that's because it speaks to something eternal inside all of us. We all understand what it means to love something we can't have. We all know the pain of choosing between what's right and what's true. That's what makes the story of Anarkali and Selim more than just history. It's a mirror of the human soul. In the final years of his reign, Jahangir often wrote poetry himself. His last writings, those found in his journals, spoke not of battles or politics, but of longing. One passage reads, "I have ruled the world, but my heart remains a servant to her memory, to her smile, to the life I could never hold." When he died, his tomb was filled with treasures, yet none as precious as the stories he left behind. The people mourned their emperor, but deep down, they mourned something else, the love story that had outlasted him. Even today, when visitors stand before the silent tomb of Anarkali, they often leave a single white flower. It is said that if you close your eyes there and make a wish for the one you love, her spirit listens, and for a moment, the world feels softer. Perhaps that is her final gift, to remind us that love, no matter how forbidden, no matter how tragic, always leaves a mark. And so, 5 centuries later, under the same sky they once looked upon together, their story continues to breathe, not through books or monuments, but through the hearts that still believe in love that never dies. Because even when walls were built to imprison her body, no one could bury her spirit, and even when thrones tried to silence him, no one could erase his heart. Somewhere, beyond time and death, the prince and the dancer still walk together through a garden no empire can touch, free at last.